Hey, so I thought I'd jump in on this conversation between Matt Dowart and Fred Conference Report. Um, so I mean, they're talking among other things about the mechanistic view of life and the organismic view of the universe. And Fred, I think rather daringly is defending the machine metaphor. I hope he at least realizes that it is a metaphor. You're, he says that your cells are a machine. No, not literally. I mean, machines are something that we make. They're devices brought by the human imagination using certain laws of physics. So, I mean, obviously, yes, our cells obey the laws of physics, but that doesn't mean they are machines. So the machine metaphor actually comes to us from Descartes, who was very interested in the machines of his day. I mean, he didn't have the electronic machines, but they had the wind-up toys that did all kinds of tasks. And he was like, "Oh, that's neat. I think maybe we operate like that." But then there's this little ghost in the machine that tells it what to do, and so then that's how her Cartesian dualism came about. No, I think machine metaphors have their place in order to make distinctions. For example, one way I've heard heard the distinction between cognitivism and connectionism explained is that cognitivists believe that the brain is digital, whereas connectionists believe that the brain is analog. Basically digital being the ones and zeros, that it makes sharp distinctions, and you have to program very complex behavior in order to create a pattern of similarity, whereas analog, it's a spectrum and it starts with similarity and has to learn to make distinctions. So I think, and what I like about inactivism, which is where I stand, is kind of they start from a connectionist perspective and then add the environment as well and say, no, actually it's not just what's in the brain, it's also there's an ecology to the mind. And I like what the way Teed Rockwell described consciousness as a behavioral field. It's a field that includes the brain, but also includes the relevant part of the environment that you're interacting with, the relationship between yourself and the environment. So the organism metaphor, Matt and I are both Whiteheadians philosophically. And Whitehead describes the system as the philosophy of organism, and I think that and both are metaphors. We need to realize that they're and so it may be that one kind of metaphor helps us make certain distinctions, but another metaphor might help us make another distinction. So I don't think we need to be dogmatic in sticking to one metaphor or another, but I think there is ample reason why the organism metaphor is helpful. I think, for one thing, what Whitehead was noticing is that with the machine metaphor, what we're basically doing is we perceive the world, we make certain abstractions out of patterns we notice there, about how say a machine works, and then we take those abstractions and abstract that back towards us and say, okay, well, with that abstraction we made, we're gonna assume that we are like that. That somehow explains what we are, and then any strange implications that come from that, you have to kind of explain away. And so we take that abstraction as concrete, and so that's why what Whitehead called that the fallacy of misplaced concreteness. Whereas what the philosophy of organism does is it starts from us. What is the our own experience is the starting point for our abstraction. And so you know, you can ask yourself, like, you know, do we know of anything in the universe that that does not experience? Do we know that anything exists in the universe that doesn't have experience? And the answer is no, not really. I mean, we get into the whole Cartesian doubt, you know, but you know, can we tell if something else is conscious? Can you prove that your cell phone is not conscious? How? I mean, we don't have any conscious measuring stick. And so, you know, so a thing that has no interiority, what we call a vacuous actuality, and no one can prove that a vacuous actuality exists. We assume that they exist because they don't interact in ways that seem conscious to us. But we do know that an experiencing actuality exists because we exist. So, I mean, we start from ourselves and then kind of work our way down, so to speak. And I think, you know, you go down to the level of objects, like, you know, like my cell phone. So, you know, it's like okay, well, it doesn't seem to be conscious, but you know, we do have this thing called quantum mechanics, and I know there's the whole what the bleep do we know thing, and a lot of people, you know, they use quantum mechanics as kind of a throwaway term, but I mean, there are some implications of quantum mechanics that seem mysterious from a mechanistic view. And I know Alan Watts once said that he thinks that the term quantum mechanics is misleading. It would be more appropriate to call it quantum organics. And I think there's something to that. I think, you know, there's the idea of entanglement. Actually, let me get to that a little bit later. First, you mentioned that flying isn't in the wings; it's something the wings do, and I agree with this metaphor for consciousness. I don't think consciousness is a thing. It's not a substance. It's not some goo that the neurons excrete. It's a process. It's an action or behavior, and it's also a relationship. You know, you look at the brain, and you know, and what is the special about neurons? You know, the thing that differentiates neurons from other cells is the way they have these little tree branch-like structure that allows them to branch out and form these complex networks. And so there's a brain is full of thousands, if not millions, of these little networks. And so people would look at the network effects, and that's where emergentism comes in, and they say, okay, well, somewhere in that in that network effect, there's an emergence of this thing called consciousness. And so, in some sense, I would agree. I think when we talk consciousness, there's I would want to differentiate consciousness from experience. I think consciousness is a highly developed form of experience. Consciousness is able to reflect back on itself. It's recursive in a way. And so, but I think below that threshold of consciousness, it doesn't lie some vacuous non-consciousness. It's more like the unconscious. I mean, Freud and Jung both believe that it was possible to have experience without it being conscious experience. That was, you know, so there's a threshold. There's a threshold we call the subconscious, where we're still experiencing things, but we're not conscious of them, and that's because it doesn't have the contrast that is necessary for consciousness. So yeah, I think that I guess what I'm saying with that is I think consciousness is more of a spectrum than an on-off switch. So back to entanglement, you know, I'm going to link to a great video on on quantum mechanics, that where he talks a lot about the double slit experiment, and actually it claims that the wave function in a double slit experiment, the wave function doesn't actually collapse. That is actually how it's actually explained by entanglement. So it actually kind of disproving the Copenhagen interpretation, which I thought that the video was going to end up kind of trying to demystify quantum mechanics and make it so it's kind of boring and mechanistic, so to speak. But it ends up coming with its own wild implications about quantum mechanics. So anyway, what it comes down to is that in the double slit experiment where you have you fire the photons through the double slit initially, and you come up with a wave pattern. And then when you try to measure it, then you get the particle pattern. And so the traditional explanation is that the measuring it, that when you measure it, it collapses the wave function. What this guy is going to say in the video is that the measuring device is entangled with the particle. That measurement and entanglement are actually the same thing. And I'd want to take this further and say that experience is kind of an implication of entanglement. And experience is a kind of entanglement. And we are our experience of the world is an entanglement with our environment. And Robert Anton Wilson used to say that people always think that mysticism is a really hard thing. You have to work very hard to feel one with everything, but you're actually experiencing your connection to everything all the time, because if you weren't, you wouldn't be experiencing anything. Every experience you have is a connection with your environment, and so I think that there's something deeply deeply serious about entanglement and its implications for consciousness. So back to the cell phone example. The particles in your cell phone. I don't want to say that those that have atoms with little electron brains in them, but it would say that there are particles that are interacting with each other, that are communicating with each other. We said they're talking to each other. It's on the one hand, I mentioned metaphors and how the machine metaphor and the organism metaphor are both metaphors, and we can quibble over those. But sometimes I think our metaphors come closer than we actually give them credit for. I don't think that it's not like the particles are actually chatting with each other like we are, but I think the communication they have with each other is a form of I think all forms of communication have some experiential quality to them, and so that they have an interiority, or what Whitehead would say is they have physical prehension. They experience a relationship between one another, and I think it's important to realize we live in an entangled universe, and if the universe has entanglement, I would say that it is also an experiential universe. That's not to say it's conscious in the same way that we are, but it would be, as Whitehead called it, an ocean of feeling. So I guess I'll leave it there for now. Peace.